Interesting.
Right, let's go live.
Right. We're live now on Facebook.
What an
Awesome. It was. Yeah, we literally had a minute, right? Or 2 minutes. 2 minutes, and then we're in fresh. So we're fresh into coming out of our talk. So this week, so for those of our listeners, both men and women who are listening, the topic today was a big one, actually, and it went in all sorts of directions. I think fireworks is probably the best way to describe it in a good way. So it went it went in all sorts of directions. The topic was conscious parenting, and it was very, very clear that it meant something different to each and every individual, as it would and as you would expect, because parenting is obviously something that is deeply personal, and is subjective to various influences, whether that's social conditioning, whether how our parents parented us and how we're then choosing to parent our actual children. It came from a perspective of if you're a single parent, it's a completely different dilemma, as opposed to having both parents in the relationship, etc. So it was, yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it was so deep, and I think we've got quite a few different topics out of that as well, haven't we, Viraj? Just to talk about. But what was really, I mean, there was so much to unpack. I think don't really know where to start with this one, but I think the first place, I guess, is, have we actually asked that question to ourselves, right, about what conscious parenting actually is? And some of the things that came out is that quite often when we parent our children, we parent it with a vision and a lens of our expectation of what we want them to be, as opposed to what they want to be. And I know there's this fine line between, you could say that as a mum and dad, that our kids don't know what they want to be because they're too young, or etc., whatever. But I think the essence, from me, on a personal that came out of it, is that conscious parenting is about having the framework, and the framework is by providing the actual correct tools, the correct, I guess, mindset, and just on a higher level, planting the right seeds, and then not having any attachment to wherever the end destination is. So meaning not wanting your kid to be that doctor, right? Because if they don't want to be that doctor, or not wanting your kid to be whatever it is, right, that entrepreneur, if they don't want to be that entrepreneur. And I think for me, it's nicely summed it up, and lots of takeaway lessons. Where I'm sure there's, as you as a parent as well. I know your one's a lot younger than mine, but lots of takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, I think parenting in itself has turned into a little bit of a loaded subject, particularly with now, we talked about it in the meeting about how social media, and you see what other people are doing and what celebrities are doing, and loads of like, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do, and all that kind of stuff. But I think for me, when it comes to conscious parenting, it's really about letting go of our own ego and our own need to get things right, because it's coming from a place of everywhere else except what is it that our child needs right here, right now from me. And also recognizing that if you have more than one kid, each one needs something different. You can't, it's not a one size fits all approach. So for me, this subject, it's something that's been close to my heart for the last couple of years, because I found, and just maybe to give you a bit of backstory, I don't think I've shared this with you. So before Harvey and I had our first two, we had a miscarriage, and that caused a lot of PTSD with just the way it all happened, etc., etc. But even when we had our first two, but I was scared. I was very protective of the kids, like just in little things, and I just couldn't be with it. And what I realized was it was coming from my need to create safety, because I couldn't do anything about the one we lost. But at the same time, what I realized was that I'm keeping myself away from my own kids, and I was there with them, but I didn't feel I was connecting with them. And then when Dr. Shefali is one of probably the biggest influences in this field, and realizing that most parents parent from their own lack, from their own needs. And what I saw was that actually makes a lot of sense, because it's an uneven comparison. I'm trying to feel better about myself and parenting in that way, versus actually, what does my son need from me right now? What does my daughter need from right now? It's not that they have carte blanche, because there has to be boundaries and management of expectations, but it can't be binary. Like, it can't be, you've got to be in bed by this time. You can't be this, that, and the other. Yes, you need discipline, but also, so just to give you an example of that bedtime analogy, I say to my kids, all right, between 7 and 8, it's bedtime. You've got an hour to do what you need to do, but by 8 o'clock latest, you should be in bed. And I'm not saying go to sleep, but at least be in your room, be in bed. If you want to do some reading, lights are out, you can listen to some music or whatever. But that in itself has kind of been a small example of how you can really try to be over disciplinarian to just keep it, or actually just have them be involved in that process of like, okay, what do you need to do before we get there, you know?
Yeah, 100. I think definitely 100% agree. I think there's a fine line between being an imposing parent and coming from a place of the right intention, but then how they see it. So you can have the right intention, but how it's actually delivered might be completely different, right? So I think for me, it's about whatever word you want to call it, having the right framework, or the right, maybe framework sounds quite rigid, but maybe having the right components. So like in your case, you're sort of saying to them, you have a choice within the hour what you do with your time, but as a guideline, we would like you to go to bed at at 8 or wherever it was, etc. Because if you don't, you're going to be tired the next day, and all the usual stuff, right? You're not going to have a routine, and you're not going to be fresh. And I think it's really interesting, because a lot of stuff came out of the previous conversation, with the men that we had, and we had 2 new men, all right, that joined as well. And it's always blessed to have new faces in there. And obviously we're not going to go into the details of who they are, because there were some deep stories, and one was going through an active divorce, literally right now, with a child in the relationship, etc. And there's parents who kind of, I guess, had strict upbringing, right, as well, where there was a physical sort of punishment, if you like, if you didn't do anything good, right, in your life. So and then we talked about the consciousness of how it transfers from one generation to another, because whether we choose to believe it or understand it or acknowledge it, how our parents parented us has some influence, right, on how we parent our children. But it's not like their program with us is our program with our children, meaning you take the best bits out of what you loved, and it's quite natural, right, with what our parents brought us up, and then whatever we deem as the worst bits, you wouldn't wish that on your children, right? So it's a personal choice. I think it's individualistic, and ultimately it's about having a connection, right, with your children. Another great example, I think it was you who shared it, or I can't remember who shared it, I think it was you, where when you go to a restaurant, how often do us, and by the way, we're not judging, it's a personal choice, how often do we go to a restaurant and we say, right, tablet A for this person, for this child, tablet B for this child, and whether you realize it or not, you're actually outsourcing parenting, right? It may seem quite harsh, but I love to hear some comments from everyone. But you're literally outsourcing parenting, because the reason you're going out there for a meal is to be together. You cannot be together unless you're present in the moment. You can't be present in the moment if you're multitasking and if you're face down looking at your phones and and your gadgets, etc. And I think there's a time and place for gadgets, isn't it? I think every parent would probably admit that there's a time and place for gadgets, and it's a massive learning tool, right? And one of the guys, one of the men mentioned that the times that our parents lived in are obviously different to the times we live in, but that's neither good or bad. It has pros and cons, right? So the access to the internet, the abundance to the internet, right, has led to so much phone time and tablet time and internet this and internet that, but it's just the age that we live in, right? But at the same time, I'm just looking at the window, like a decent day, it's, sun is shining. How about get the bikes out and go for a walk, or kick the football around in the park, etc. Right? So I think there's a balance, and I think it's so easy to be submissive into lockdown, and then the environment that we're in, and to say, okay, it's just easier to do, you go in your room, I do this, you do that, and it's like, wow. And it really reminds me of that movie Ready Player One, where you're I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's an animation, a brilliant movie. Whereas it's a whole world that you're just living in a virtual reality, and I think without getting too deep into that, it can be like that, right? Like if we're oblivious to what our kids are doing or what they're not doing, because who knows, right? Sometimes it's difficult to keep track of what they're doing, right? In terms of, I mean, online, by the way, you know, in terms of whether it's Minecraft or whether it's this or whether it's watching YouTube videos, it's just, it's a journey. I think it's safe to say any parent will say parenting is a journey, and it's not about, this is my personal opinion, but it's not about the destination, because we have no right to dictate the destination of our child, where he or she goes and where they grow up to be, and the person they kind of actually be. That is an influence on us, right? In terms of the role model, and one of the men mentioned that quite nicely, that just be the right role model, right? And the rest will kind of fall into place. So it was so much we could talk about. There was lots of stuff from there. It's
I mean,
just a fascinating subject.
and I suppose the role model one's the best one, as if you want to really dissect something, is you can be an example, but don't have the expectation that they're going to follow.
Yeah, exactly. And I think and that's the kind of key in essence, isn't it? It's almost like, and one of the other guys in the group who actually isn't a parent gave a really great example, and it's something that I use, and I'm sure you use as well with your kids, is that if you want your kids to do something that you think is constructive, that you think is quite powerful and enriching their lives, then don't tell them to do it, show them to do it. So what I mean by that is, in his case, he kind of used the example of, you know, having a whiteboard and having some structure, but actually giving the freedom in terms of what can happen between, you know, morning time and breakfast and lunch and all that, and having that creative space, right? And in my case, it's literally, you know, I'm passionate about business, right? So I talk business 24/7, whether my kids like it or not. But they pick up on these things, right? And they're like sponges. And for me, it's like, if I want to do something educational, what do I love doing? Well, I love playing Scrabble. So I've got this Scrabble competition going on for ages now, right? I can't remember what the tally is. All I know is I'm losing to my 16-year-old, because he keeps making 7-letter words like it's like it's nothing to him. But it's educational.
Yeah.
It's, I love doing it. He loves playing it. And then ultimately what it is, it's a connection, right? It's a bond. So I'm not telling him to do something. I'm showing him something I love that he happens to now love as well. Maybe it's a competitive streak in him, etc., because it's typical at that age, right? Teenagers, but whatever it is, it creates that connection. So I think we have to just find whatever that is, and instead of telling our children what they should be doing, how about, and I think this wasn't me, this was one of the other guys who mentioned it, how about, so instead of telling our children what to do, how about asking them what they want? And I guess you've got to put that into context, obviously, but
Yeah.
that's a powerful question, right? Just to ask them, because we might assume that they're happy, we might assume that they're content, but if you don't ask them, because see, mental health, we're talking about mental health, let's keep it real here, right? But this lockdown and 8 or 9 months, I'm losing track now, of not being in school, that's got to play a massive impact on their mental health, whatever age they're at, right? And lack of friendships, you know, bonding with people that you used to bond with, the routine, the mentor coach, about, you know, the relation. Every child has the best teacher, right, that they like, etc. So that's kind of lost there, because it's all virtual now, and there's just lots going on, isn't there, really? And then there's people trying to juggle jobs and business, and then one parent was talking about rota management, and it's like, you must like got a rota for your work, then you got a rota for homeschooling, and it's like, there's a lot going on.
Yeah. And I suppose it kind of comes back to the very essence of what conscious parenting is. And it's not just about the child just being happy, but actually how can they grow and develop through some of their challenges, and actually be in a position where they get to experience something versus kind of being told what to do. Like, how could you create that autonomy and actually that connection and respect because as the child grows up, its needs are going to change. But if you're still trying to parent it based on what you think and what your needs are, that disconnect starts to become wider.
Mm.
And it's almost about what is so this was the thing that we touched on, is that our children are our mirror. So how we're reacting to our children is actually how we're reacting to ourselves. It's not the child, it's us. So if a child doesn't do something that we want it to do, our reaction is the, you know what I mean? We're reacting from that. Actually, it's not to do with the child.
No, definitely. I think one thing that's quite powerful, I think it's almost like, use the analogy like conscious parenting. I think for me is shining the light on the components and the tools that might help him or her in their life as they evolve and grow up. And some of those tools, just to extrapolate, might be having the right ethics, just being a good human, core values, having the right mindset, not having a fixed mindset, having a growth mindset, right? And experimenting. And life is about, you know, experimenting. And then it's like when they have access to the right tools, it's just a lot more powerful. It's almost like me and you will not think that if we want to hammer a nail, right, what tool are we going to pick? We know it's a hammer is the right to hammer a nail, right? So if they're going through mental health or whatever challenges they're going through life, if they know that, okay, dad or mum has showed me, not told me, has showed me that this has helped them, then they're going to tap into their inner mindset. They're going to tap into their inner conscience, right? And say, right, okay, fine, I express myself through writing or painting or playing football or exercise or whatever. And that in itself is powerful, right? As opposed to telling them that everything's going to be okay when I mean, that's just a falsehood there anyway. I'm not saying be a pessimist and face that, but I think we have to have a reality check that growth takes all shapes and sizes and in all directions. And I think having the right components and framework is there, but the success, whatever we deem as success, I'm not personally focused too much on success for my children, but having a happy upbringing and having a happy life is down to your personal choice and what you do with your career or business or marriage or no marriage or whatever it is, right? But we're just showing you potentially what might be the right way to do it, but we have no kind of formula for what might make you happy, because what made our parents happy in the previous generation is completely different to us, and then it's going to be completely different to when our kids get married, right?
It's interesting. I want to share something that I was working on with a client of mine who is in a situation right now where there's a lot of expectation on them to get a relationship, get married, all that stuff. But that's not their ultimate priority. It's actually their parents are, and again, parenting, what we're talking about, this is at all ages, is not just from childhood, but there's a fear that their parents are going through about how, what are people going to think because you're not in a relationship, let alone married. But then it's like, but what about you? Like, have you said how you feel? It's like, no. So it's like, so there's a bit of a gap in terms of when we as parents place expectations on, or attachments, let's call it that. We have a certain expectation or attachment. Our children need to be a certain way, or have, so people don't talk about us or them. But let's get real here, because it's all about the ego. We don't want to look bad in front of other people. So our parenting is we're going to manage our children. We're not really going to parent them, because we want them to tick all the right boxes, go to the right clubs, get the right grades, etc., etc., etc. But when you go back to the very root of it, it's like, but what does the child want?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point you touched on, because we, as parents, we all have the aspiration for them to have obviously a good and happy life and successful and health and, you know, and all that stuff.
But is it our version of a good and happy?
That's exactly what I was going to come on to. And that's the key, that in that journey of conscious parenting, are you nurturing the child for the journey of growth, for their growth, or are you nurturing the child for the destination that you're seeing through the lens of your own eyes, right? That you want them to be in. And there's completely two different things. And I think what was really interesting is one of the guys posted who is a parent, friend of mine as well, and said that something about we all know this, right? That kids are mirrors and they're tape recorders and they will mirror everything you do, etc. But then something that came to my mind is that, do you recognize the invisible conversation that you're having with your child every day that you haven't acknowledged? So let me say that again, because just to unpack it. So do you recognize the invisible conversation as a parent that you're having with your child every single day that you have no idea that you're having? Meaning that the actions that you do as a parent may not be visible to you or on the surface, but every single moment it's like an imprint, right? And every single day, by you doing whatever you're doing, good or bad, you are having an invisible conversation with your actual child. And at some point, it's really powerful, I guess, and insightful to just check in with them, saying, right, are you happy? And not happy in a superficial way. Like how many times as parents do we say, and this is a classic, right? And everyone will relate to this. How was school? Oh yeah, okay. What does okay mean, right? So I stopped asking that a long time ago. So I literally said, so what happened today? And they look at me thinking, crap, has dad clocked onto something that I don't know that he knows, right? Or have I got into trouble and have I kept it? Like, it's just that intriguing question, right? What happened today? And you can take it any way other than just speak the truth, right? And because you don't want to get cornered in one way or the other. And that always works for me. And I always just say, what happened today? ... And let them interpret it any way you want. And I actually get 9 times out of 10, I get a real kind of conversation of what generally happens. So my youngest one will say, oh, Dad, yeah, we went to this assembly, this and that. And he tells me the whole story, right? Literally, which is great. But I think it's just tapping into being present in the moment with your child. One guy who was new, who came to the group, said, he's watching Superman, or I think where it was the new, I don't know where it was, the new Superman series, etc. Clark Kent, and that's yeah, and that's daddy time, right? That's his time with him. One parent said, he's playing football with the actual children. So whatever it is that you're doing, I think pick your moments. I think one of the dads was saying that, and it's okay for him because his daughter is super active in sports, and he's doing quite a lot of classes. And then the other side of the extreme is you could kind of do so much for them, like so much tuition, and you could completely drain them out, right? But only you as the parent and the child in that relationship can deem what is too much and too less, right? It's just it's a constant learning, right? Every single day, you're always learning something new.
I think the thing to look at is give up the fear of getting it wrong or trying to get it right.
Yeah, because like there is no kind of like pendulum of extreme right and extreme wrong. I think it's a journey, and I think if you're I think one of the guys also mentioned, I'm not sure if he's a parent, but he suggested a great topic about feedback, and that just opened up a lot of different conversations. And it's like, how do we respond when another parent or somebody else in a life gives us feedback about how we're parenting our own child? Do we get defensive? Do we absorb it? Do we action it? Do we acknowledge it? Or does it depend on the intention behind it? Meaning, if you have a group of 5 people in your life, whether it's brother, sister, mother, dad, friend, neighbor, whatever, and gives you feedback, you have the same 5 group of people. One comes from a place of love, so it might be harsh in terms of how it sounds, but it comes from a place of love. The other 5, it comes from a place of malice, and they have no intention to see you grow or your children grow. And I think it's feedback is great, right? But what's the intention behind the feedback, and how is it being delivered? And I think if it's that classic saying where 3 people are telling you something, you don't know each other, there's some truth in that, right? there's some truth in that, and there comes a place where you have to kind of drop your own ego and acknowledge it, right? And what you do with it is a personal choice.
Yeah, I mean, feedback's a great point, and I want to bring it back to, it's all well and good getting external feedback, or even being, whether it's solicited or not. But when it comes to parenting, ask the child what's working for them, what's not working.
That's the best source, right, of the feedback. In this,
need.
yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. It's like our interpretation of I'm speaking as a dad, right? Whether you're a mother or a dad, our interpretation of what success is and what is amazing is going to be completely at sometimes misaligned to what they are, right? Like if I show you, for example, a Van Gogh painting, and I show you a Bansky artwork, right? It's kind of two completely different things, right? One's maybe considered graffiti, and one may be considered a work of art because of who Van Gogh was, etc. But it's individual, and it doesn't really matter. Like, I think it's almost like the analogy I'm trying to create is that give them the paint and give them the paintbrush, but don't dictate what's on the canvas, because only they can do what they, only they can paint their own version of life, right? Whatever that is. I mean, I don't want to get too deep into this because, but I just wanted to share that. I just wanted to share that thought.
Yeah.
That's quite synchronous, right? Conscious parenting. Is that your little one?
Yeah, he knocked on the door first.
Nice. I love the timing of that.
Case in point. But as you were saying earlier, like, there's a room for Banksy, and there's a room for all this, high-end art as well. And I think at the same time, it's appreciating that both can coexist. That neither is right or wrong, but also being aware of, as you say, in the canvas, well, what is the paint that I need right now, and who's holding the canvas?
Mm.
And like, and I suppose it goes, just come back to my point there, just to link in, is that parenting is one of those things that if you try to get it right or try to avoid getting it wrong, you're in no man's land. But if you work with your child and understand, okay, what is it that they need from me as a parent? Like, you can be the perfect role model for them. Let's say that as an example. But is that what your child wants from you? Because I could spend 90 minutes pumping iron and my kids are seeing me, doing the gym. But actually, Dad, I just want you to hang out with me.
Mm.
I
No,
love that.
100%.
But I actually just want to sit down and read a book with you, or watch a movie.
But this is where you have those natural check-in points, right? And children are quite I mean, we're all kids, right? At one stage, but
kids will tell you straight. That's the thing. They will tell you straight. Whereas I suppose as an adult, it's more subtle, it's more nuanced. It's kind of those undercurrent advice. Whereas you ask a kid, okay, what do you want to do in the next hour? Versus, okay, we've got an hour free, we're going to go for a walk. They're like, but I don't want to go for a walk. And then they'll kick up a tantrum, be like, now we need to do something. Versus, what are we gonna do in an hour that's not screen time?
Definitely. I think the other point I just want to, before I forget, I want to bring up is what was quite key, and I think I shared it from a personal example of mine. Yeah, it's quite funny actually. Is that I can't remember the exact age. I think was it 10, 11? Was it 10 or 11? I can't remember. So my younger son, he was, I can't remember exactly when he was 10 or 11. It's like, and I said, I think it was, I don't know what happened, but I was just trying to give him a hug. And in that moment of reality, he's like, oh, Dad, I'm too old for hugs now. I'm like, okay, cool. But what's fascinating on reflection is that, and I think we talked about it quite deep on was one of our previous talks, right? Is that we all know that the language of love is different, right? And there's, there's a book about it. There's lots of people talking about it, etc. But there's 5 languages of love, and in that was my language of love, in terms of, oh, give me a hug, a hug, that'd be great. but then that might not be his language of love, right, in terms of expressing it in that moment, and it wasn't, right? But it doesn't mean that there's no love there. It's just kind of different. And I think it's important to acknowledge that as parents, that changes as they grow up as well, right? When they go from, a baby to, youngsters to teens and etc., and then obviously adults, etc. And I think it's different for different parents and children, but it's just I think it's pretty cool that there's all these moments of learnings, right, along the journey, and I think that all these learnings are there, but it's just acknowledging it and slowing down, and then just seeing it, and then understanding it, and then thinking, wow, okay, they've changed, or wow, I've changed, etc. But it comes back to, there is no getting it right and getting it perfect. That's kind of a fallacy, I think.
Yeah, I think it's about just staying in tune, like because as the child is growing up, its needs are changing, and how can they effectively be on it, because they know exactly what it is that they want from you, and it's working in tune and creating that partnership with them. I mean, this kind of goes against the grain of what we've spoken about, but taking yourself away as being the authority versus being a partner in parenting with the child.
Yeah, easier said than done. Definitely. But yeah,
like, no one's ever learned how to become a parent. Like, you just become a parent the moment the child is born, and then you try to do what's right, or you will naturally lean to your influences, see what worked, see what didn't, your own experience, and you create your own hybrid version. And I think there's a lot of relevancy in that as well. Yet at the same time, that's coming from a place of, okay, what was my experience being parented, and what can I take from that to parent my children? So while there's scope for that, I think the gap is still, okay, but child, what is it that until they're at a point where they can begin to articulate that even when it comes to enforcing boundaries, it's okay, let's co-create this boundary. We know that by a certain time we want to get to bed so we get sufficient amount of sleep to wake up for 6 o'clock to get to school. Now, what do we need to put into play? Versus, okay, 8 o'clock bedtime, go. And then you get that resistance, and then it turns into an argument, and then actually getting ahead of that and having them enrolled in that process as one example. Or even when it comes to eating food. Like, I had a great conversation with my daughter 2 days ago, where we were talking about stuff, and she's relatively healthy, but we were talking about, like, she's like, I don't want spinach in my pasta, Dad. And I was like, yeah, but we make it, it's the same. And like trying to, give her the health benefits of it and all that stuff. And I said, yeah, but, and then she said, yeah, Dad, I know, but I just don't like it. So, what can you do? I was like, okay, well, I can't force feed you, but if you just don't like it, you just don't like it.
Yeah, I think something else you just reminded me was really interesting is that how should I praise this? So it's almost like the most, I think, magical thing as a parent. One of them, I mean, there's many, but one of the most is the moment of realization that you've helped them, not done it for them, but helped them unlock their creativity and their learning, and then a moment of acknowledgement that they have, not you, that they've found their North Star, right? Whatever that is, like, and it's not our North Star, because it could be completely different. And then that in itself is quite powerful, to watch and nurture and guide, but not be actually dictated by the outcome. But yeah, I think that's quite powerful. Like, I have no idea what my kids want to be when they grow up, and I keep sort of at different points saying, oh, are you interested in this? Are you interested in that? But it's not boxing them in anything, because that's would be completely morally, from my perspective, wrong to do. But it's like, I'm curious, right, as a dad, like, what is it that you want to be when you grow up? Like, what is it are you interested in? Whatever it is, it's great. I support you as long as it's kind of 3 rules, right? Whereas as long as it's legal, long as you're doing something that gives you inner joy, and as long as it puts a roof over your head and your family's head, right? But I'm not referencing the last one with money, but it's it's the safety that money can provide, but it's a tool. It's not the the primary objective. Yeah. But right, I think, God, man, we can talk. We can talk for ages. I think. I'm not sure if there's anything that you wanted to comment on, or
there's a couple of questions, but I like Nimesh's coming because I like, for example, carrots. I say it helps them see in the dark. It's like I was fed that one.
What did he say? Sorry about carrots.
Talking about the spinach. Nimesh's comment is
okay, fine.
In the dark. But again, that's a great example of like how you tell a white lie to convince your child to do something. You know, and are they really doing it, or are they being forced to do it? And then what impact will that have later along the line where they almost start doubting you? It's like, oh, you said this, but this didn't quite happen. You know, so
yeah, the moment of truth when they realize that there is no Father Christmas. Anyway, that's a separate. The amount of times I've said that Father Christmas has come down the chimney and given you a present, like, really, Dad, I'm quite old now. It's like then you realize, okay, he's too old for that.
I got that question. It's like, Dad, but we don't have a chimney. How's he going to come in the house? We lock the doors at night. I was like, well, yeah, okay, you got me. I'm not even lying. Question here from Nimesh: what would the fundamentals be for parenting? I mean,
what's the question? As in, like, is that it, quote unquote? What are the fundamentals of parenting? Or I think it's. I mean, my version is completely different to your version. I think the answer is in the question, which is it's going to be different. I mean, you can go for it, and I'll answer it, but it's completely different to each parent.
I think, given what I've learned, experienced, and seen, and from people that are parents, and for some of the studying I've done in reflection, and Dr. Shefali is a fantastic authority, is don't try to fix yourself through your child. Would be the first one. Your child doesn't need you to be anything other than who you are right now. And if they tell you, take that on board. There's another one which I'm just trying to put together in my head because I think it's an important one. Is stay committed in allowing the child to develop into who they organically are. So they are a seed of consciousness, and create an environment with them that allows them to nurture and blossom, versus doing what you think they need based on your experience.
Yeah, definitely some great fundamentals there. I think for me it's about, I guess, allowing them to be their authentic self. And what I mean by that in a deeper way is that not being scared to stay true to their core values. So that's something that I would encourage as a fundamental, because there's a richness that comes from a place of authenticity and staying true to whatever your core values are. So I think that would be probably top of the list. And then second, it will be about life is bigger than who you are, meaning it's about service to others. So if you can do whatever you need to do, but along your path, help people, I think that's going to humble them. And I think we all have egos, so I think it helps to contain the child's ego. So I think that would probably be the second one. And I think the third one is just to smile from inside out and to do things that really, really embrace your inner child. And I guess the reason I'm saying the last one is because when we grow up, we forget to embrace our inner child, and we forget to do things that are just crazy and out there, and but yet when we're children, we wouldn't bat an eyelid and do those things, right? So I think those would be my three, I guess, that just come to mind.
And again, anyone that's on live, please feel free to share yours as well. And yeah, just as we wrap up, actually, no, I think that's the perfect ones to wrap up on, because it's just from those that we shared. I think the inherent theme is free yourself, free yourself, and just allow yourself to be with your children and not try to be an ideal that you think, but just again know that you're already as a parent whole and complete, and just give your child you.
Yeah, like the most blessed thing about this lockdown, right? If all the parents out there look back on it, is if you literally map out in your own mind or write it down on a piece of paper how many things that you did with your child. It doesn't have to be new things, it could be more of that you did as a result of the lockdown because you were forced to go inside, whether it's more bike rides or whether it's more father-son time, mother-daughter time, mother-son, whatever it is, right? How many of those things that you did, and acknowledge it and celebrate those things with them, right? And the key thing then is, are you going to be doing that post-lockdown? Because that's also dangerous, right? To stop the good stuff. It's easier said than done when everyone goes back into whatever they're doing in terms of the rat race, etc. But I think it's precious, right? I think it's almost like just acknowledge the time that you have with them. I guess appreciate them, and that's probably a big one, right? Because sometimes we just take a lot of stuff for granted. And yeah, there's always times where they'd be naughty and this and that, but I think there comes a place where you can discipline from love. It's probably more powerful than disciplining from a place of telling them off. And I've learned that, right, as well, and I think we've all learned that. So yeah, there you go. We can talk about this for ages, but it's a fascinating subject.
Absolutely. And on the theme of subject, we are looking forward to having our creative meeting during the week and getting the next few. So if anyone has any suggestions on what they'd like us to cover, either in the private Zoom or as a Facebook Live, please do share with us, either in this thread, or there's a post on our page as well, which is called Have Your Say. We'd love to hear from you guys. And again, I think this was a great conversation we've had, and just looking forward to maybe revisiting it in the future if that's what some people want, or touching in on some new stuff.
Definitely. It potentially sounds like it may be a follow-up one. But yeah, thank you so much for everybody who's tuned in live, and thank you so much for everybody who's contributed in both ways, just watching us live and acknowledging us and being present with us, and also watching us on replay or commenting. Super thank you for all the men who join every time we have these talks, and for the 2 new guests that joined this week. We hope you guys loved it. If you didn't, let us know. We love feedback, etc. We're constantly learning. One of the questions that one of the guys asked is, what are you guys going to do when lockdown finishes? And I think it was pretty unanimous from our side. I know we've discussed it with Saga and Havan as well, that we're going to continue going and show up for you guys, and potentially also look to introduce workshops, because that's literally how we started. So thank you so much for everything. Massive shout out to our sister groups as well. Always do a shout out to them. We wouldn't be here without them. So go check out Reroute if you're 18 to 35 and a female on Facebook, and go check out Mental Wealth on Facebook, etc. So that's women for all ages, etc. And definitely go check them out and support them as well. Have a super blessed weekend, and yeah, and happy parenting.
You guys got this.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.